Speaking of regulation, etc., Cardano founder steals the show at congressional hearing on crypto regulation. In front of a congressional hearing, Hoskinson spoke cogently and appeared relaxed in making a case for more equitable regulatory treatment for cryptocurrency industry. At a U.S. Congressional Committee hearing on June 23rd, Cardano founder Charles Hoskinson gave his take on the future of crypto regulation. The purpose of the hearing was to discuss the effectiveness of current regulations with a view to implementing a future framework. A lack of regulatory clarity is a sore point for the industry. Recent times have seen this play out in numerous examples of heavy-handed enforcement action at the hands of U.S. regulators. However, representing the industry, Hoskinson put forward the position of developers, explaining how a public-private partnership would be the best interest for all concerned. I want to say thanks to Twisted Blockchain for the $10 super sticker, boosting that algo for us. The U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Agriculture, Subcommittee on Commodity Exchanges, Energy, and Credit hearing focused on closing the gap in regulatory oversight of the digital asset market. In his capacity as an expert witness, Hoskinson made the point that, quote, innovation makes specifics difficult regarding regulation. Therefore, regulations should focus on principles rather than formulating particular rules for individual events. The Cardano founder gave deciding on which risks to safeguard against, what rights users should have, and how to use tools for the greatest possible good as an example of principles. On the matter of regulating cryptocurrencies as commodities or securities, Hoskinson said that the issue is more complex than resolving a binary argument. Quote, when you look at cryptocurrencies in general, I have always viewed them as financial stem cells. They're more fundamental than a particular category like a currency or a commodity. To that end, what trumps a binary argument is a holistic approach that takes into account public policy considerations based on what regulators want to achieve, such as sanctions, compliance, consumer protection, and/or market stability. He said, so I don't think it would be wise to say it is a security or a commodity, or fall into this temptation of who's the more permissive regulator or what is the regulatory arbitrage. Rather, just take a step back and say, what things do we want to guard against? End quote. Social media feedback on Hoskinson's performance at the hearing was overwhelmingly positive. One Twitter comment said that Cardano founder enlightened the committee with pure class. Another congratulated him on a great job in representing the whole crypto industry really well. The case has been stated. It now falls to the committee to take this forward for a more equitable and holistic approach to crypto regulation. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about crypto regulation because I think there is this misconception, and I think that a lot of people need to understand the fact that like crypto is moving extremely fast and not dissimilar from just all of the improvements that we've seen over the digital age, right? And this digital transformation that I refer to that we're going through. And kind of one of the final pieces to this digital transformation is going to be some sort of way to run the digital economy, right? As we move into it, that is a fact of the matter. And we have a couple different ways that we're going to go about it, right? We're either going to go the CBDC route and the federal government, the nation states will control everything, or we'll go the Bitcoin route and the power will be given back to the people and you'll have much smaller forms of self-governance in little pockets, right? And it doesn't have to be within a border, right? Like it doesn't have to be the state of Texas being independent and having their own cryptocurrency. That's not necessarily how this plays out. It's digital, so it's cross-border, right? This can play out a lot differently than people really expect. And I highly recommend listening to the Sovereign Individual via audiobook if you have time to do that while you work out or whatever. If you want to read it, of course, definitely I encourage that as well. Highlight it, mark it up, find out and pick out what's going on, because that book was released in the 90s and has become eerily similar to what has been going on, right? As it pertains to everything that's happened throughout this kind of digital transformation in the digital age that we're going to be living in. But one of the things that it points out that is extremely pertinent when we're talking about regulation is how fast things move. Because we are talking about the digital age, we're talking about a time in which we can communicate a lot quicker with a lot more people across the world. And that has been one thing that everybody's had to get used to, right? Before you had to send a letter in a mail and then it took a long time to get there. This is why government has representatives, right? Like at least in the United States, because you couldn't just have like a full-blown democracy in that case, because you had to travel to make the rules to a far off location, and that took time. And even if you wanted to send a letter, somebody else had to take that letter to a far location to your Congress members or whatever it may be. So you needed representatives to represent the people in those cases. And that is one thing where part of how the digital transformation is changing this. Now, you know, we have representatives on Twitter getting inundated by people all day long with messages and tweets and so on. And there's just a plethora of information. Everybody has access to knowledge as well at a greatly accelerated rate. So everything is accelerating very quickly. And crypto is one of those things that's going to accelerate extremely quickly, to the point to where I do not think that traditional regulation is going to be sufficient to actually play a part within cryptocurrency. Meaning, because we've gone from things like ICOs to DeFi to NFTs in basically a few years, in the matter of just like a few years, right? We have all of this digital asset stuff going on, and the government just is too slow to keep up with it. And they can do blanket statements, right? In the case of China, just banning cryptocurrency mining. But did that work? No, clearly it did not work, because 20+% of the Bitcoin mining hash rate is still online in China. So a blanket ban isn't going to function. It's not. I'm sorry, it's just not going to function. Trying to get through in individual regulations on something like DeFi when all the users control their own keys is near impossible. And so the idea that Hoskinson brings up here is something that I actually would agree with to a certain extent. I still think it's a little hard for them to actually go through and get all of this done even, but a principled standpoint from the government would be the best point of attack from their perspective if they want to have control over it and regulate it properly, right? I think the term was, let me get this again real quick, a more equitable and holistic approach, right? A principled approach. So kudos. I haven't ever been a fan of Cardano or necessarily even like Charles Hoskinson. I'm not a fan of proof of stake. I think that it has its problems. Even if you have, you know, a revolutionary idea surrounding it like Ouroboros or whatever. I'm a mining guy. That's where I sit. I think that you have to have some sort of real world tie to value of whatever currency it is. But he has been a very vocal and pretty accurate proponent of cryptocurrency. As a good public face, he is also pretty humble. If you follow him on Twitter or anywhere else, he is very willing to go out and promote, not promote in like a scummy way, but if he sees good ideas that aren't part of his project, for example, like Ergo, which obviously he has a tie to the developer there, so maybe not the greatest example, but there are other examples where he goes out and he will be like, this is a good idea, this is why it's a good idea. And he usually has pretty good reasoning behind it. So I think that it's a good face to have, and kudos to that. I still think a lot of cryptocurrency, to that point, I just wanted to follow this up because people are always like, well, what's the next Bitcoin, right? And I do want to bring up the fact that basically nothing can be the next Bitcoin based on one single factor, and that is all other cryptocurrencies have a singular problem, which is a people problem. And by a people problem, I mean they have people in charge of them running them, right? Bitcoin does not have that really. What they have is a consensus that has to go through the miners to approve changes to the blockchain. And there's no overarching like developer that's sat up that's basically has an economical advantage to everybody else within the blockchain. And that is kind of where I see the point of the Bitcoin maximalist at the very least, right? I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Morning Show every Monday through Friday, 7:45 a.m. Pacific and 10:45 a.m. Eastern Time. You can check out more clips here, or if you're interested in checking out the entire live show, you can check that out down here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Tuesday.